I do think that Hikaru will have then checked his lines.
Yeah, it's tricky, though, because in that type of opening that they had in the first game, finding a computer improvement doesn't necessarily solve your problems compared to the games that Nakamura did solve against Mamadjarov, where checking the computer in a sharp position where there was only one move at every turn. There, it is effective. In the type of position Magnus got earlier, computers aren't that helpful unless you really study with them for hours.
Hikaru's
just a small break this time.
Hikaru's laughing here. I wonder what that is about. Maybe something the arbiter is saying, because at this point, that will be the only people they're communicating with. Okay, but we have started.
Yeah, we have started, and Magnus, it's a backup opening. It's not the same opening he chose in the first game, this time opening with his king's pawn, last time with his queen's pawn. And now it's symmetry so far, king's pawn opening and the Italian game. This is what Magnus did against Levon Aronian. It was his main weapon in yesterday's semi-final. And Magnus, I have had a chat with him about this opening. I know it's one he's a big fan of. He thinks it is quite promising in terms of just getting a position, not necessarily walking into your opponent's homework, because on every turn you have 4 or 5 good moves. There's no way your opponent can predict everything in this opening. And this position, it's got bad memories for me. On the brink of becoming a world junior champion, world under-20 champion, I had this position with white. I only needed a draw, and it didn't work out. Oh. So, yeah, this position, it's developed a lot over the years. That was a long time ago. It's still been battled at the top level between many grandmasters. I haven't seen Nakamura use this one lately, though. Usually he goes for a different setup in this opening.
Yeah, but I have seen Magnus Carlsen play this against Wesley So in the Opera Euro Rapid. So, yep, definitely things to do. But he has played a different move. You know, he's being very versatile. He wants to diversify the position on every opening. And you can see there, Hikaru there covering his eyes with his hands. And he's trying to remember the theory, because this is not the most popular move.
No. Not the most popular move, but it is a trendy one. So White had 2 main options in that last position. The most natural, and the move I played all those years ago in the World Junior Championship, was to just move the white rook across one square, eye up Black's pawn in the centre of the board. Instead, Nakamura now has to worry about what to do after Magnus's last move. White pushing pawn on that left-hand side. That pawn is destined to gain even more space, and Nakamura, he still has to worry about what happens if White pushes another pawn on that flank, maybe attacking his bishop later on. Lots to consider here for Nakamura, but surely he studied this position before. And, OK, he looks off to the left. Every time he looks off to the left, it means he's trying to remember something. He's trying to recall something he's studied before. Now he's trying to keep us guessing by looking off to the right as well. But, yeah, for sure Nakamura has studied this. He's just trying to remember what he thought was the best move for Black.
So Magnus having Hikaru think here after 8 moves, is that a successful opening then to Magnus?
It's a moral victory, isn't it? Yeah, you kind of feel some satisfaction that your opponent has had to think a little bit. And basically that Magnus's approach has been a big success.
And it's interesting that this opening, it's called the Italian game. When Nakamura faces the Italian game, 99 times out of 100, he plays something else. Oh. So he played something different this time because he tried to surprise Magnus. But Magnus said, no, I'm not surprised. I'm going to surprise you in return. So, yeah, psychological warfare.
Yeah, but the surprises keep on coming, David, because Hikaru actually responds with a not very popular move, actually. It is much more trendy to actually pick up the pawn that is on the edge of the board and either advance it 1 square or 2 squares, and just to either control the space or make room for the bishop. But, OK, instead, Hikaru goes, I like to pin. And we do like that expression, to pin is to win. But, OK.
Not this time, I think.
Not this time, definitely not.
Look just below the player's cameras. The computer suggestions 3 moves for White give an advantage. Magnus plays one of them, kicking back that bishop to the edge of the board. The bishop didn't want to trade itself for the knight. That bishop wants to maintain a pin against White's knight, against the White queen. But if we bring up the analysis board, this move, this whole idea for Black has a bit of a dodgy reputation as far as I know, having studied it myself. Black should, as Jovanka mentioned earlier, have pushed his own pawn on this side, because now White has the option of pushing his own pawn and not I mean, this doesn't look too scary for black, but not only does white gain space, he also takes away this square from these two black pieces. Those two black pieces actually need the square. Actually, the knight is the one that needs that square the most. And if you notice, for example, later on, white has the idea of bringing the queen forward, hitting this black knight, and this knight will never be able to use its ideal square. As far as I know, white getting a pawn to this square is a huge gain in this opening.
Wow.
It really paralyzes black's ideas. Black on that left-hand side now is a bit frozen. And if white, for example, steps forward, this bishop's going to have to retreat some really bad squares later on. And black's pieces are going to get all in a jumble.
And Magnus doesn't need asking twice. He's going to do that. One thing I've noticed with Magnus is Magnus loves to expand with his pawns on the left side of the board. He's constantly pushing those pawns forwards and just trying to get as much space as possible. So, I mean, I definitely think this whole opening choice has basically been a moral victory and perhaps even a positional victory for Magnus Carlsen. I mean, it is very difficult to face the world champion. And when it comes to our quiz of the day, that is what we're asking. We're asking, if you had to play Magnus Carlsen in a match, how would you prepare? And you can tweet your answers using 3 hashtags this time. Hashtag chess champs, hashtag opera, and hashtag new in chess. And of course, everyone is coming up with their own rather novel approaches. We have Edmund Mukundi, who says if he were to challenge Magnus Carlsen, he would have to learn all the sacrifice positions and risk it all. I wouldn't want to play an endgame with him. No, sir, I agree with you. It is excellent, excellent idea. Spike Solid, on the other hand, says, if I were to play Magnus Carlsen in a match, I will try to learn an opening. And after the theory, I will pray to not get checkmated very fast. I understand that one completely. When I play top grandmasters, I have this kind of mental thing in my head that I'm like, don't get checkmated in 20 moves. In less than 20 moves, you know, once you pass it, you can relax and you can enjoy the game. But no one wants to lose in under 20 moves. So I understand Spike. And Barista du Femme du Mundo says that he would prepare, and this seems to be a very popular strategy on Twitter, I would prepare all the noodles I can eat in front of the world champion, playing the noodle gambit. And yeah, you can, if you want to enter our competition, please tweet your answers using the hashtag chess champs, hashtag opera, and hashtag new in chess.
Yeah, and meanwhile, Nakamura having a bit of a think there, but he did retreat his knight from the centre. So we did mention that knight a bit unstable. It was defended by the black queen, but it has retreated. And on the face of it, if you look at things, black looks like he's doing OK, but everything will start to fall apart because black's pawn in the centre is a huge target. Also, black's bishop creating that pin, it will end up a bit offside. If we bring up the analysis board, because we do see some computer suggestions here, the top computer suggestion is actually to continue that strategy you mentioned, Jovanka, that Magnus loves. He's pushed his pawn forward, he pushed it again. Why not continue it? Step 3, push it once more. Push this pawn all the way to the end. You destabilize this pawn, and black doesn't really want to capture, giving himself ugly doubled pawns here, an isolated pawn here. If black instead just advances 1 square forward, suddenly this knight lacks protection. This knight has no one guarding it. You can attack it with your queen later on, or maybe more pertinently, you can attack it with your bishop. And as soon as this knight moves, the pawn in the centre will be a huge target. This type of position is a nightmare. I've been there so many times on the black side. It's really hard to find safe squares for your pieces. I think if Magnus Carlsen plays this move, it's not the only one, but if he plays it, it's going to be difficult for Nakamura to start fighting back.
Nightmare, it's such a good word in chess, the knights there. I have to tell you guys something. We have another decided game in the battle for 3rd place. Levon Aronian winning the 3rd game, and that means all the games have been won by the player with the black pieces. So that's quite spectacular in chess, right?
So rare at the top level.
Yeah, totally rare. But it's a little bit unsurprising. We did see Hikaru Nakamura convincingly beat Hikaru Nakamura 3 times yesterday. We also saw him play very aggressive chess. We also saw a little bit of the same from Levon Aronian. It didn't quite work against Magnus Carlsen yesterday. But on day 1, we saw him try all sorts of tricky things. And, it looks like it's being a very good night for Levon.
Well, it could be. So he is up by 1 point then in the battle for the third place, the first match. Mamjaro, he has to win that last game to tie the match. If it is a draw or Levon Aronian wins with the white pieces, not likely in this one, then he's going to be the winner of the first match. So definitely going to keep an eye on that as well.
Yeah, and that whole match, I think that third place playoff between these two entertaining players, it's just an advert for chess. Just all the decisive games. I've taken a quick peek. So much chaos on the board. Both players all out, taking risks, not scared of losing. And yeah, fireworks.
And I actually talked quickly to Simon Williams, Ginger GM, joining us after this game. And he told me he wanted to show us a move that was played by one of these players in one of the games. So we're actually going to get, we're going to get a little bit of insight in what has been going on in the battle for third place. All right, but we do have a few moves here.
We do have a few moves, and note how Magnus, he didn't take that opportunity to continue pushing his corner pawn, continue gaining more space, lengthening the scope of the white rook in the corner there. Nakamura did take the time to block the advance of that pawn. That's well worth one move. You always want to block your opponent's pawn pushes, your opponent's most annoying ideas. And Nakamura, now that he's played that move, he will be feeling much, much safer. And Magnus, with his last move, jumping into the centre with his knight, he's basically just trying to remove all the risk from the position. And he's actually saying to Nakamura, you can trade my knight, you can make the pawn structure symmetrical, but he's hoping that his pieces will be better placed. And Nakamura, with his head in his hands, just as he's about to make a move, let's bring up the board. Let's show what he's thinking about, because White has just jumped in with his knight. If this knight is captured, which it probably will be, because White is maybe threatening a pin along this diagonal. If the knight is captured, after knight takes knight, pawn takes, it looks like these pawns now very balanced, blocking each other. But the key thing, the key reason White has the advantage here, and we're going to see it, the key reason White has the advantage is because this knight is badly placed. Nakamura now moving his king. That's an aggressive move. I was going to say the knight is badly placed because it's got nowhere to jump, forward at least. It has to jump back later on. It's completely dominated by this pawn. This pawn controls all of the entry squares into White's half for that knight. And Nakamura, his last move, shifting the king to the side, again, looks very innocent, but the reason the king has shifted is because now it is off this diagonal, and that means that the pawn is freed up. No matter what White does, I think Nakamura, he's tempted, well, he will be tempted to push this pawn forward and really explode open the centre, explode open the position towards the white knight that is pinned along this diagonal.
No, I love that line that you pointed out, David, you know, a bad night with no prospects. And, yeah, when you have that kind of situation, well, you do have to mix it up. You have to create chaos on the board. I mean, I personally think that that's a great strategy from Hikaru, because he is in danger of getting positionally overwhelmed, especially on the left side of the board. Just look at those pawns. They're amazing. And, OK, and Magnus says, no, you want to push your pawn forward? Ain't going to allow that one. And he steps forward with the queen. And if you notice, what a lovely dual-purpose move that is. Because, you know, first of all, it gets out of the pin. Great job there. And secondly, it actually prevents black from advancing his pawn 2 squares forward. He was dying to open up those lines, and now that is no longer in the equation. So, good idea.
Yep, the queen protects the white pawn once that is captured, so that just completely destroys black's hopes of playing that move. Very nice by Magnus, but Nakamura, he's changed his plans. He moves his queen, planning to line up the black rook with white's queen. Yeah.
And the wait-and-see game kind of continues. I mean, I do quite like this game where one side has this strategical overwhelm. By strategical, I just mean just great pawn structure, great pieces, and everything is just primed for dominance. And Hikaru has to fight against this. And he has to fight against this by creating some random ideas. He has to confuse Magnus. He has to wait for the action to strike so that he can respond. So, like David says, Hikaru is just intending to centralise one of his rooks, just line it up against the queen and wait and see what Magnus does, because there's still a lot of dynamic possibilities in the air.
Yep, still a lot of dynamic possibilities. And if it does come down to a situation where black has to burn his bridges and has to just go all out, then Nakamura will do that. But I've noticed recently, in the last few years, Nakamura, his style has become maybe more mature, maybe, again, geared towards those long games. Nakamura wins a lot of his games by waiting for the opponent to go wrong. So Nakamura, as long as he can, he'll try to just slowly improve his pieces, keep the tension, slowly maybe start chipping away at White's strategic edge, White's superior pawn structure on that left side, maybe just improving those black pieces on the way. But, yeah, either Magnus will continue building and Nakamura will have to go all out on the attack, or Nakamura will slowly manage to consolidate. Actually, this reminds me of his Armageddon game against Mamedyarov yesterday. Very similar pawn structure. And Nakamura there, he did solve Black's problems very naturally, not taking too many risks, just playing very easy, simple moves. So, OK, Magnus just shifting his rook to the side there. Notice how that rook is on the same line as Black's queen. So if the position opens up, White will likely gain some time there against the Black queen. I expect to see Nakamura do the same, line up one of the Black rooks with the White queen in the middle of the board.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
he doesn't.
He doesn't do that. Instead, he moves his knight backwards. I mean, OK.
We did say that knight was bad, right, Ivanka?
Yeah, we did say it had no prospects. It was not doing a good job and had no hope. OK, so it's trying to manoeuvre itself into fresher pastures. But, OK, I was expecting the rook to move. But now that I've seen this knight retreat...
You like it?
I like it. I like it because it's headed to... the knight is headed into the centre, and from where it can actually eye up a square that is actually very, very aggressive. It's like the hallmarks for an attack. Yep. And
so, for example, if White just moves a piece, Black's knight will jump in, and the hallmarks of attack, you want to use this square, right?
Yes.
So the knight, if it jumps to that square, it would attack the White queen and it would edge towards the White king as well. With that in mind, maybe I want to cover that square. And Ivanka, the move that I would be very tempted to play here, dual purpose move, is one, to push this pawn forward. So your knight will never use this square as Black. So even if you jump forward now, you can never use this square. My ulterior motive, my secondary idea for White using this pawn, apart from covering the square, is to use the protection for this square, the knight jumping to the side. And Magnus plays it, and White's knight now is going to try and do the same as the Black knight was trying to do, and jump into the square to harass the Black queen. And we'd mentioned a few days ago, knight on f5 will thrive. If the knight gets there, White's in control. Really nice move by Magnus. I like it myself, but it's typical for this type of pawn structure. White pushing forward, preparing this idea.
Like, that is just an evil genius type of move, David. I mean, it's just fantastic. I started laughing because I was thinking that is such a David kind of move because, you know, first of all, when the knight does go to the square, just look how many squares it can go to. Oh, look, it can't go to any squares because it's been dominated by a pawn. And this I've noticed is... This is something that I've noticed you love to do. And then when you kind of said, well, the knight will go to the edge and then go to f5, where it will thrive. I was like, oh.
But will then Hikaru's plan now be to stop that plan? Will he try to protect that f5 square?
He will do at some point, quite likely, but it's not so easy because if Black's pawn ever drops down to protect that f5 square, the Black bishop on the edge of the board loses all of its retreat squares. So, yeah, you mentioned, Ivanka, that it's a very David Howell type of move, but that's why they call me a poor man's Magnus Carlsen, right? Because Magnus, he also finds it, and it looks powerful. It looks like a good one.
I've never heard that, David, actually.
I've heard that many times.
I've never, ever heard that at all. So, yeah.
A budget version.
Well, even that is a fantastic chess player, no doubt.
Yeah, I'm desperately trying to think of something that... well, Hikaru can do to meet this dangerous idea. I mean, it's not necessarily that dangerous, but it just looks scary and it just looks overwhelming. I mean...
It's not even on its own. I mean, the knight on f5 on its own won't do too much, but it's just once it gets there, the rest of White's pieces will start jumping forward. OK, Magnus looking away there, slightly distracted, but he goes for it. We're heading straight to that position that we showed on the board a few moments ago. Black's rook now finally lines itself up with the White queen. So will we see Magnus jump in with that White knight? We do, attacking the Black queen. It's found that perfect f5 square. Is it going to thrive? The knight. Nakamura, he reacted quite quickly to this very scary plan. I personally would have taken a bit more time as Black just to try and find a way to cut across my opponent's plan. If you see your opponent's plan coming, you have to find a way to counter it. And Nakamura, he allowed it to happen. Right now, I think all Magnus needs to do is move the White queen. I'm not sure where, but move it out of the eye line of the Black rook. And Nakamura's in trouble. The Black knight, as you mentioned, controlled by those 2 pawns we highlighted a few moments ago. The white knight, glorious. If you ever attack the white knight with a pawn, your bishop on the corner gets trapped.
Yeah, and it's not just the black knight that is dominated, the black bishop as well. There's got no future. I mean, OK, right now there's a threat. Right now the bishop is threatening to move away, and there will be an uncovered attack on the queen by the black rook. But OK, that is a very simple threat. And as David says, all that Magnus needs to do is to move the queen away. There's not a chance that Magnus won't see this. OK, where would the queen move to? Let's be a little bit concrete about the whole thing. Would you step to the centre to kind of like keep the queen on like the Goldilocks kind of row? Because that kind of row is very Goldilocks, and it's Goldilocks because, you know, obviously she likes things not too hot, not too cold. She likes it perfect. And the queen in the centre on a square on the 3rd row is very flexible because she can go to the right, she can go to the left, she can go forward, she can go backwards, and she has a lot of power. Just look at her like this. So, yeah, I would be tempted to step.
Slide to the right.
Slide to the right. Yes.
Yeah. I think that's a very natural move. The only thing that maybe is making Magnus Carlsen hesitate is that he might want to use that square for his bishop.
Right.
But
that makes me hesitate as well. But, you know...
Maybe there's just no better square, though. You don't really want to retreat the queen all the way next to the white king. You don't really want them to retreat the queen to the left side because, actually, she's probably needed in the centre and needed near the white king. So, yeah, I agree. I like your move, Jovanka, but Magnus looking for options.
Yeah.
He has a choice, but either way, it has to be a queen move here for Carlsen.
That would just be astounding if he didn't do a queen move.
You mentioned, Jovanka, that... Oh,
wow, OK. I'm going to eat my words. Something else happened on the board. I mean, he picked up his pawn and he attacked the bishop. That wasn't actually something that occurred to me. I was thinking of very directly, like queen is indirectly attacked, queen must move. And I didn't have the flexibility to understand that actually you can get away with pushing your pawn, attacking the bishop. And the big point is that if black has an effective move with the black bishop, the one that's lined, the dark square bishop, then, well, you can't really move it to an effective square because the queen will just slide away all the way to the right.
Magnus looks distracted. He's been looking off to the right there several times over the last couple of minutes, and he played such a committal move while being distracted. Look again, he's looking... yeah, he's not looking at the board too much.
Well, we know he's got some big windows right in front of him, right?
Yeah.
Looking out to the street, so maybe something's going on outside on the streets there.
Yeah, and yeah, you can see the harbour. And OK, meanwhile, just below the players' cameras, we did see the stockfish, the computer suggestions. Black found the best move, the most natural move as well, not taking the time to uncover an attack against the white queen, instead saving his bishop in the corner of the board. And we wait to see Magnus Carlsen's idea. I did not like that pawn push from him on the last move because you burn some bridges. Pawns don't move backwards. There are now some weak squares that have been left behind. And the whole reason Magnus Carlsen did that is to just kind of create a square, a safe square for his queen. Magnus there shaking his head. He has created a safe square for his queen. That square wasn't possible to use because black bishop was controlling it previously. But it feels like a small gain for a big loss there. You lose a lot of control of squares, but you do gain a slightly better posting for your queen. Yeah, so Magnus, it looks like a very committal idea when he had other safer, more kind of consistent options. Yeah, it just feels so unnatural. That pawn, it pushed itself one square forward a few moves ago, then it pushed itself again. If he was going to do that, maybe he should have done it earlier. And,
so what do you guys think right now, this game? A draw, a win for white, a win for black?
All three results still possible. If you asked me 2 moves ago, Kaya, I would have said a win for white.
OK.
But Magnus, with that last decision, taking risks, the white king, it looks safe for now, but it's a bit airy, a few holes around it. And what do you think, Jovanka? I'm trying not to commit and to give my answer here.
Yeah, I'm going to commit. And like I said, I quite like Magnus's position. I mean, I have a different disease than David. I like to push pawns. I like to advance as far as I can go. And I'm quite encouraged by this pawn thing, this pawn advance, mainly because, well, if you just kind of look at black's position, I agree. It is a very committal pawn advance that Magnus has done. At the same time, Black has got no activity. You know, he's not doing anything. Every single way he turns, there's something wrong with his position. There's no space. And I do envisage that Magnus should be able to do something here. Just play a few natural moves and keep asking the question to Hikaru, what you going to do? Because it's not that easy.
Yeah. When you said, what you going to do, I'm thinking, bad boys, bad boys.
When they come for you, yeah.
But one thing that, OK, Hikaru making faces, he's not happy with his position. He just pushes a pawn, stopping any potential advance of White's pawns. I was going to say one thing you could do as Black, but you probably don't want to do, is to eliminate White's strong knight. You could play bishop takes knight, but White will capture with his central pawn, attacking Black's knight and opening up a line for the White queen. So that's why Nakamura, he's trying to delay that decision as long as possible. White's knight is strong, but you don't want to remove it yet. You want to wait until the right moment. And right now, there we see, again, move suggestions. Very natural. White can just develop a bishop, move a king. Both of those high up on the radar for the computer. And Magnus, he just moves his king. The reason he did that is because his queen was undefended. And in chess, especially in rapid chess, when you don't have much time on the clock, just keep everything protected. Loose pieces drop off. You can't allow any tactics against undefended pieces.
Totally agree with you, David. It's a multi-purpose move, but it also, that king move is really, really sly. And the reason I'm saying it's sly is because suddenly the white rook now has the possibility to slide all the way to the right. Now, why do you think I want to slide the rook all the way to the right? Because that is the making of a potential an attack. And, OK, well, we've seen some big changes in the position because Hikaru jumped in with the knight. That knight has now been quickly removed by Magnus. And now we have a completely different situation on the board where Magnus has no control over the dark squares, but an overwhelming position. And that is why he's actually traded his knight for the dark square bishop. And Hikaru made a very, very quick choice because primarily he was forced to. He had to capture back with the pawn. And look at Magnus. He just plonks his bishop into the centre. And that is one bad piece. I mean, bad. I was going to say bad boy there. Thanks to you, David.
Sorry. Yeah, that is one devilishly strong piece. White's bishop in the centre of the board, dominating everything, eyeing up Black's pawns on the left. If you compare it to Black's bishop is completely hemmed in. It's hitting against concrete. White's pawn in the centre is rock solid, and it will be probably for the rest of the game. So right now, White has a better pawn structure. Black has doubled pawns on that F line that we mentioned, the same line as the queens. Black has an isolated pawn in front of the White bishop, and Black's bishop is so much worse than its counterpart.
And I'm just noticing quite a few tweets that are popping up here because we're wondering why Magnus is looking off to the side all the time, like he's doing right now. And actually, there is a Real Madrid game going on right now. So we do have quite a few viewers thinking it's probably a football game he's watching.
Yeah, he would have had to have asked for special permission, I guess, to watch that one alongside his chess game. But I wouldn't put it past him, big football fan.
Well, but is it taking his focus away or is it still going good?
I mean, I would never dream of watching football while I'm playing an important chess game with so much money on the line, so much pride at stake. But Magnus is Magnus. He does like to play. Well, he plays his best chess when he's relaxed, simply. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll find out. I thought it might be some of our viewers tweeting, you know, we're talking about what you would do if you were facing Magnus Carlsen. I thought it might be some of them just outside his window trying to distract him, test his concentration.
And on that subject, David, we do actually have some really cool tweets. Again, for our quiz of the day, we are asking, if you had to play Magnus in a match, how would you prepare? And you can tweet your answers using 3 hashtags. Hashtag #ChessChamps, hashtag Opera, and hashtag #NewTheChess. And Tamara Jankowska says that she thinks that preparing for that match is just wasting time. As a normal human being, she won't win. So she would just be glad to meet Magnus and will try to make him laugh. And that's a nice, I approve of that one. We saw David was very successful in making Magnus laugh. And Carl Portman says that men can multitask, snooker, football and chess, the holy trinity. And Valon Barisha says that he would actually prepare the bomb cloud variation. Knowing Magnus and being a huge fan, I know he would go bomb cloud against me as a weaker player who hopes to have all my pieces on the board already by the first 10 moves. Yes, but we actually saw Oh, wow! Hang on a second. Back to the game, David, because something has happened.
Yeah, we saw Nakamura as well, surprised by that last move, and he's trying to work out whether Magnus has just come up with genius or whether he's come up with a blunder. Magnus sacrificing a bishop. He's just played bishop takes pawn. That bishop can be captured. And look at it, Stockfish says black can get away with recapturing that bishop. Black will suddenly go up a bishop for a pawn. Magnus has a sneaky idea in mind, but does it work? That is the big question, and I think we're going to have to bring up the board to show this. Maybe we can keep an eye on the players, because there will be some big reactions. White has just captured a pawn on this square, but the bishop could be taken for free. Take that bishop. Hikaru, he needs to, otherwise he's just losing on the board. He needs to go into this variation. White's whole idea is to step forward with a pawn, a double attack against against the black queen, and opening up a surprise against the black rook. And in this position, Black needs to decide, how do you save those two pieces? I don't think you can save them both at the same time, unless you play this move. Drop the queen back, protecting the rook, saving the queen. And Magnus, he's weighed up this position. We're going to get there. White now, look at how many pawns he has on that left side of the board. He has these 4 against Black's 1. So White now is dominating in terms of pawns, but he has a bishop less. And maybe Nakamura can save the game by bringing his queen across, because now maybe the move Magnus missed. After rook takes rook, queen takes, White cannot take this rook anymore, because suddenly at the very end of this long variation, there's a nasty check. And suddenly attacking the white king, attacking the white queen, Black would win. This bishop, the black bishop, protected by Black's queen. Yeah, this one, it's so complicated right now. Has Magnus missed something, or is he still got things under control in the current game position? He can't win a rook. And if he can't win a rook, will his pawns be better? Will White's pawns be better? Or will the black bishop simply block them later on?
Exactly. Wow, this is incredibly dangerous. I mean, but those, I have to admit, in all fairness, those pawns are pretty scary. I mean, they're not easy to kind of calculate, but just look at that. Like, one of them is two squares away from queening. That is going to strike terror in the heart of Hikaru. Now, Hikaru really has to go into ultra-focus mode, because, yes, Magnus can't go rook takes rook because of the line that David just showed. But, I mean, there's plenty other options, right? Or is there nothing to do? What's
happening to Magnus? He's not focused at all on the game, and he's just played one of the most committal decisions, sacrificing a piece. Knowing Naka's body language, Naka thinks he's winning. I've seen this face before so many times. Naka is currently focused on the position. He's thinking, have I missed something, or am I just winning as black? Nakamura thinks having that extra bishop is going to be better than having the white pawns. Occasionally you see Naka frown, and yeah, right now Magnus needs something quick on the board and the clock, because if he doesn't justify his piece sacrifice, I don't think those pawns are enough. They look scary, they look strong, but...
Well, I would immediately go for... No, I would not do that. I would have pushed the pawn actually up the board. And, OK, well, Magnus took a different decision. He traded off rooks, and I was not so a big fan of that move. And after there, he plays his rook to the centre, now nicely covering the dangerous bishop move and getting ready to advance the pawns.
Yeah, so Magnus, he had to kill his opponent's main idea. Black's main idea, as we saw a bit earlier, was to bring the black bishop to the centre of the board. That has been prevented. Black's rook now is under attack. White's queen threatening to take it. Naka, he has to deal with that threat. So, OK, he blocks the white pawn with his rook. It's time now, Jovanka. Your move.
Yes.
Start pushing those white pawns.
Yes,
otherwise
I mean...
it's too late.
Exactly, and I have to say, I do quite like... chess grandmaster Yasser Sarawan's expression for pawn pushing. Push him, baby. And, OK, instead, Magnus has decided to capture the pawn.
So, OK, taking one of Black's pawns. It's now 3 pawns for a piece.
Yeah, but I do feel that this is an issue of timing, and that it's very important to get that extra thing going. And yes, I know it's an extra pawn, but it would have been way more scary to start advancing those pawns. OK, now Hikaru has moved with the queen, and then the big issue is, what is White going to do now?
I really don't like that move by Nakamura. Queens are always best towards the centre of the board. That's a very passive move. The whole reason Nakamura is doing that is because he thinks his queen on that side of the board will stop the advance of White's pawns. But Okay, there we see the computer suggestion for white is to just centralize the white queen. Meanwhile, Magnus, he doesn't go for that. He steps forward with the white king instead. That is quite a logical strategy. He's putting everything on dark squares. Look at all of white's pawns, actually, especially on the left and in the center. Look at all of white's pieces. They're on dark squares, not the same color as black's bishop. So, yeah, right now, Magnus trying to push pawns. He's putting nearly everything now on dark squares. Only one white pawn remains on a light square. This is quite aesthetic stuff by the world champion, at least.
I mean, I have to admit with you, I really admire that king step up because it's not something that would have been on my radar, actually. I would have been so focused on harmonizing the position just to promote those pawns that I didn't think about taking a time off. So, yeah, great stuff from Magnus Carlsen. And you can see him advancing there. Is he just trying to gain space, or is this perhaps the markings of a dangerous attack on the right side?
I think white... Well, I think it's just too risky to continue advancing. I would never even advance the pawn in front of white's king, at least. I would maybe advance the corner pawn. You mentioned earlier, Magnus loves to advance his corner pawns to gain space, to take squares away from the opponent. But the pawn in front of white's king, I think that would be a step too far.
Right.
So, yeah, a bit of a waiting game. Magnus had his head in his hands for a moment. Maybe he's realising he's not fully focused. Nakamura, meanwhile, I said maybe he thought he was winning. He's starting to realise it's not so easy for black. Black is maybe on the defensive for now, at least. But if he can maybe relocate that black bishop or improve the black queen, I still think black has decent chances. I don't fully agree with the evaluation bar, which it says 0.0. I think either this is very good for white or it's going to be very bad, especially if white can't push his pawns on that left side.
It's actually not very easy for Hikaru to come up with a plan. I mean, I'm looking at some natural moves, like you're saying, relocating the queen, just trying to snake the way in towards the right side. But, OK, Hikaru actually just centralises, well, he moves his king one step closer to the centre.
Yeah, that king move, it might look mysterious, but I guess the plan is ideally long-term to trade the queens, and then black's king is closer to running across and stopping white's pawns. And, yeah, it's back to Magnus. How does he improve? He'd love to push pawns on that left side, but it's not possible yet without dropping a pawn because of the placement of the black queen.
So is it time now to drop the queen?
The white queen back?
Yeah, drop the white queen back and, well, then we start pushing.
Yeah, that would make sense. Magnus has a sneaky way by retreating his queen to maybe support the advance of those pawns, but it's not easy. This is not the type of position that you want to play with only, well, less than 2 minutes on your clock. And Magnus retreating with his king, that's back where the king came from. Is that kind of a silent admission of defeat, admission that he has no plan, that he's not doing anything, he doesn't know what to do next?
Yeah, I think that's the case. And I think it's a dangerous waste of time, actually, to move his king forward and move his king to the side backwards and then advance some pawns on the right. I think he needed to get on with his goal of pushing those pawns on the left, because once the bishop is allowed to blockade, well, Hikaru's position becomes a lot easier. And, yeah.
Yeah, that bishop has improved itself, stopping a potential advance of white's pawns on that left side. And, yeah, it feels like black is slowly improving his position. Magnus seems to be at a loss of what to do next. And he had such a glorious position, and taking this huge risk, it's yet to be seen whether that backfires. And, OK, Magnus has no idea what to do, so he's just retreated his king and stepped it back to where it came from. He's just playing the waiting game, sitting and hoping that Naka can't improve his position as well.
Yeah, little time left for Magnus on the clock as well. Definitely more time for Hikaru. And I have seen several times Magnus's eyes shifting to the side. We're wondering if he's watching a football game here. And he's probably going to regret that. If he looks over this game and sort of sees what you guys have been seeing, that he really did have some big chances.
Yeah, he was fully in control, and it was only as soon as he started looking off to the side that things started unravelling, and now it's anyone's game. And we do see the computer, the bar is starting to edge over towards black's side because white has wasted so much time now with his king.
And Hikaru just improving his bishop one square at a time. And I think this is just what black needs to do, you know, just continue reinforcing his position, just guarding against the advance of the pawns on the left. And, OK, Well, David, well, here comes a kind of a clash of strategies. You kind of said definitely never, ever advance the pawns in front of the king. And Magnus has said, I'm going to go for it.
Magnus really taking huge risks. He didn't necessarily need to do too much. He could have continued his strategy. He's being inconsistent. He moved up and down with the king, losing a few moves, and then he struck and moved a pawn forward. The white king now looking mightily exposed. There are no attackers around it yet, but the white king will never have any pawns. I was going to say pawn shelter, but then that pawn, I guess, steps forward to maybe protect the white king. I'm surprised Magnus did this. He actually gave up a pawn in that little transition, but it was to secure a central square for the white queen. What do you think, Ivanka? Is this just the world champion losing the thread, or has he found a setup where black can't break through, black can't improve his position?
I mean, I still think black's position is actually practically and psychologically a little bit tricky. I mean, it's just the kind of whole idea that if you're a little bit too careless, then white's pawns will advance. And once they start advancing, I think it will almost be game over for black. But at the same time, I feel between this position and the position a few moves earlier, I think it's only Hikaru who's improved.
And Hikaru slightly shaking his head. That's probably because he wanted to maintain his time advantage. Hikaru loves to have an extra couple of minutes on the clock, just as a bit of leeway when things get really nervy and really sharp. But, OK, Hikaru did spend a minute there and then just brought the black king across. Black's play, at least, has been consistent. He's improved the black bishop. He's brought his king across, using the bishop as shelter. Whether they're good or not, I'm not sure, but Nakamura at least sticking consistently to one plan. Magnus is the one who's been kind of going really direct, then taking a break with a slow move, going direct again, then taking a break. It feels like the world champion now, he needs to show us what he's got in mind.
Yeah, and he has 1 minute on the clock to show us, David. And when the clock gets down below 1 minute, well, then panic starts to basically rear its ugly head. And, OK, Magnus also moving his king. I mean, there seems to be... What can Hikaru do to make that step-by-step improvement?
I don't really see it yet. Hikaru doesn't see it yet, how to improve his pieces. But the one thing we should mention is Magnus would love a draw right now. Just the way he's been playing, moving the king around, he doesn't really know what to do. He's asking Hikaru to repeat the position. And actually, OK, I said I'm not sure what black should do because there's a lot of ways you can maneuver. The computer thinks that black's best is to just shift the black queen across one square to the right, eyeing up one of white's pawns, and that would actually cause some questions, at least, for Magnus Carlsen to answer. Still not decisive, still not winning for black, but at least it would have posed a difficult problem for the world champion, a problem which he would have to face with less than a minute on his clock. Meanwhile, Nakamura bringing the black king back to where it came from. Maybe Nakamura as well isn't sure what he can do, and Nakamura, if he continues moving the black king up and down, the white king dancing up and down, will go to a draw. That face.
The struggle is real, you know?
That was so sudden. He was just suddenly up in the camera.
Yeah. We've seen so many faces from him, but never that one, right?
I love Hikaru Nakamura. He's just the perfect online player because he gives us these faces. Fantastic.
Yeah. And it looks like he's calculating something. You know, the head has gone up and the eyes are kind of looking like they're... Oh, what is he calculating?
Well, it seems intense.
Is there anything to calculate in the position? It's just about grouping the pieces together in a constructive way. I liked your idea, David. I think you have to be a little bit sly in how you approach that idea, because you need to do it when the white king has gone off on a little bit on an adventure. OK, so he's repeated the move with his king, and now will Magnus repeat his idea?
So this is the second time we've seen this exact position. If they continue to move around with the kings, which it's looking quite likely, then we would have a draw. It would be a threefold repetition, same position 3 times. The game is declared a draw. But, OK, Magnus is the one thinking now, despite the fact he's down to 20 seconds, he's debating whether he can continue playing. And Magnus Carlsen plays for the win. He doesn't go for the draw, which Nakamura quite likely would have taken. And Magnus grabbing a pawn, but allowing the pride and joy of his position, the white pawn in the centre, to be taken off the board, to be snapped off. And white has created a pin. White's a piece down for only 2 pawns, a bishop for 2 pawns. That's bad for white, but he has created a pin. Black's rook cannot move because the king would be under fire from the white queen. So can either side improve? Is there any way to put pressure on that black rook? Is there any way for black to break that pin over the next few moves?
Well, Magnus has given a check with the queen to the centre, and all the while the clock is ticking down. Magnus Carlsen steps aside with his king, and he has 36 seconds left on the clock. And look at Hikaru's king. It is out there in the middle of the board. That has to be terrifying.
Scary times now for Nakamura. So that must be why he made this face, because he saw what was coming. And now the black king in danger. The black rook, no, it's still pinned. If black plays rook takes rook right now, black's queen would be under fire suddenly from the white queen in the centre of the board. So black's rook is frozen. It can't move. Black maybe needs to first improve his queen. He could also maybe move his bishop. Lots of choice now for Hikaru Nakamura, but he has to be careful. Also, pawns have started disappearing. If all of black's pawns disappear, white is out of danger. So Magnus, being very sneaky and very practical, he's removed a bit of risk and he's still setting traps for Nakamura. And look at the clock times. Both sides now down to under 40 seconds. It's all about the nerves.
Yeah, definitely. And David, that is actually a very natural move. That is actually a big mistake. It's a big blunder in the position. And Hikaru has made the big blunder. This is a huge, huge blunder.
Wow.
And the reason is because Magnus can sidestep with the queen, one square, and give a check. And Magnus has done it.
The only winning move as well.
Yeah.
And Nakamura, he's put his queen on a bad square. That was the move I thought was most natural as well. But he has fallen into a trap. Now, Nakamura, wherever he puts the king, white will simply play...
Rook takes rook. Rook takes rook check. And now the big problem is that after rook takes rook, Hikaru cannot capture the rook with the queen, and he cannot capture the rook. Magnus doesn't see it. OK, maybe he's just repeating. OK. Ooh.
He'll repeat once, and then he'll try for the win.
Is he just playing with his food now?
Yeah, what is happening, David?
Yeah, so Magnus, he will play rook takes rook. There we go, the rooks have disappeared. He repeated that to gain 20 seconds on his clock, gaining 10 seconds after every move. White is 2 pawns up and completely winning. All he has to do is avoid the checks. And I think black's checks are going to run out. Nakamura, look at it, he realises he thought he could make a draw by continuously checking the white king. But white's king will actually just hide at the side there. OK, black didn't have enough checks, so he starts grabbing pawns. White's just a pawn up. Queen endgames. We saw Nakamura lose one yesterday to Mamedyarov. This one should also be lost. But still some hard work to be done. So Magnus Carlsen finding that great, well, setting a trap, finding that great continuation, playing for the win, but still has to finish this one off.
So Hikaru's going to be annoyed now. He missed this.
Yeah, he missed it, and now he just has to beg for a draw. There's 2 results possible, white win or a draw. Most likely going to be a white win, and that's psychologically so difficult when you've got less than a minute.
Oh, yeah.
And it's also psychologically difficult because, as David says, you know, Hikaru was doing OK. He had just kind of turned the tables. He was doing some good defence, and then suddenly a big blunder, and it's all gone downhill. And, OK, the win still needs to be found. Magnus still needs to play good moves because there is a high chance of there being a perpetual check. So, but OK, Hikaru now with 20 seconds left on the clock, and it's ticking down. He needs to find a safe space to put his king, and he moves one step down. And now the dream for Magnus is if he were to be able to do a check, which actually swaps off queens.
Yeah. If the queens disappear from the board, white is winning. White has a 2 versus 1 advantage on the left, and even if black's king goes after those pawns, white's king will go after black's pawn on the right, and white will be ahead in any race. And that's a really nice move by Magnus Carlsen. I've seen him play so many queen endgames. He always knows when to centralise the queen. Queens are dominant in the centre of the board, and now Magnus, not fearing any checks, he's going aggressive with his king. Also, look at the black king. It's actually cut off. It can never step towards the right now because white's queen dominates it. The black king is kind of caught in a cage, can only hang out on that left side of the board. And that's why white's going aggressive with his own king on the other flank. And now white gives a check, double attack, checking the black king and attacking black's pawn on the left-hand corner. It looks like Magnus, he's about to win this game. He's about to wrap it up. Maybe you still have to work a few things out. If you take that pawn as white, if you go and grab that pawn, you would have to deal with some checks. Magnus just gives another check himself instead.
Yeah, and all the time, Magnus is building up the time, and it's Hikaru that is seconds down on the clock. And just look at the control that Magnus is doing with his queen. You know, every single move, he's preventing checks. And Hikaru is desperately trying to hide his king behind some shelter. And Magnus, once again, moves his king and is not afraid of a few checks.
Yeah, that's a really nice strategy, actually. I mentioned that the black king couldn't get across to the right side. It has found its way, the black king, to that right side of the board. But as soon as the black king goes that way, white's king goes the other way. And white's king's going to the left suddenly. So Magnus just doing a bit of dodging, dipping, diving there, and he's outmaneuvered the opponent's pieces. And black's king now not contributing to the battle at all. It's essentially white's queen and king against the lone black queen. That's an extra piece for white. He's going to use that teamwork to win the game. And
look at that white king go. And of course, Magnus is setting all the traps because black cannot capture the pawn, which is now on prise, on account of white just sliding over with the queen and giving a check. And that is why Hikaru has moved his king, but it's just perfect strategy. The white king on the run, and it's headed one direction, to the left.
One direction, indeed. Meanwhile, Magnus continues centralising the white queen. White's king and queen there, occupying central squares. It's so beautiful.
Wow, yeah.
You barely even want to move those pieces. They look so good. Black's king, look at it, in the corner. Terrible. And white's king continues its journey. And look at it, the white king is not, it's not afraid.
Every move it makes, it just cannot be checked. I mean, what a beast that king is.
Complete domination.
You're total. Hikaru is just really in the last throes of the game.
Yep, Hikaru in the last throes of the game just has to sit and hope and move the black king up and down. All Magnus needs now is a winning plan. And he's going for it. He's giving a check. He will quite likely bring the white queen over to that left side and help the white king start winning some pawns. And that's what to do in endgames. As long as you realise you won't get checkmated, if your opponent's only attacking you with one piece, go active with your king. Why not? And Magnus was able to do that just because he had that extra kind of bonus of the extra pawn. And Nakamura has to react to that check. Nakamura, just his body language, he knows it's over. He knows there's pretty much no hope at this stage. He's just making moves. Magnus, all he needs to do, as the computer suggests, as Stockfish suggests, bring the queen over, challenge the black queen, force that black queen to give way, and white, with that 2 versus 1 advantage on the left, is going to make a second queen quite likely.
Yeah. Wow. It's looking good for Magnus Carlsen, and he's really built up time on the clock as well. Dramatic for Hikaru. 15 seconds now.
I mean, it's the board, it's the clock, it's everything. And it was all that one mistake, that one trap he fell into earlier.
And look at Magnus, you know, actually his strategy is just perfection in itself. Every single move he's made is been about overprotection of his pieces and dominance. And Hikaru, all he can do is just shuffle the black queen backwards and forwards, and it's no good at all. And that is a killer move from Magnus.
Now the black queen forced to run away. White's king can step closer to those black pawns. First, Magnus gives a check. He's going to give a couple of checks to re-centralise his queen. Magnus, we've said it so many times, normally when we're talking about the opening or the middle game, he knows exactly where to put his pieces, right? He keeps finding checks and gains time to centralise his queen. And black is attacking a pawn right now, so Magnus needs to defend it, but there are several ways to do that. He's just playing with his food. Yeah. And he checks again, centralising his queen with tempo, gaining time to do that. And white's king is just going to step to that left now.
It's going to go to the left, and it's going to hide itself. And again, once again, Hikaru cannot do a single thing about this. There you go. The king is now attacking the pawn, and the king will hide itself behind the black pawn. And what can Hikaru do apart from just move the queen back to where it came from? And now Magnus just has a very pleasant choice. All he has to do is win that pawn, and those 2 pawns on the left will simply advance. And you can just see Hikaru shaking his head. He knows it's all over, and all because of that one big mistake.
And Magnus giving a few more checks, getting a bit more time on the clock. He's up to 2 minutes now. So he knows he's winning, and he's eradicated any risk of losing on time. And just great strategy. And, OK, he moves his pawn forward, slowly advancing on every move.
Exactly. I mean, he doesn't give Hikaru one chance. No way has Magnus gone wrong at all.
We're running out of superlatives, Jovanka, for this play. It's just too strong.
It's just a model queen and pawn endgame. I mean, what can we say about this except admired perfection?
Is this what Magnus is expert in?
Yes.
I mean, endgames.
Yeah.
Even if the queens are on, we're calling this an endgame.
Yes, if it's just queens, it's definitely an endgame. It's a queen ending. And, yeah, he knows exactly where to put the pieces, how to coordinate his pieces. That's the key thing. Also, he knows exactly when to run with his own king. And right now, White's king can actually take a pawn. But Black's queen is also threatening one of White's pawns. So I expect to see Magnus just take a timeout, protect that pawn first, not take any risk, and then the pawn next to the White king is going to drop off within the next couple of moves, for sure. Nakamura trying his best. We should give him some credit. He's been fighting. Yes, he did blunder earlier. He missed this idea, but he's been fighting. Magnus now steps up with the queen. Forgetting about that pawn on the right side, OK, which has been taken by the Black queen, but White's king now snacking on a pawn, and there's a clear path for both of White's pawns, actually, to run down the board. Those two are going to be much quicker than Black's one.
Yes, OK, and now the pawn has come down. I mean, is there any chance with Hikaru perhaps giving a few spite checks? And, well, Hikaru tries, you know, he pins the pawn and prevents it from advancing, but now the Black king can simply actually step to the side. And it does that, sorry, the White king, can step to the side. And now, look, there's another pawn to make Hikaru's life miserable.
Yeah, two's always better than one when it comes to passed pawns, especially when they're connected, when they can guide each other, hold each other's hands and advance. And the White king, it will find a safe square because it can be sheltered by the White queen. There we go. And Black can continue giving checks if he wants, but those checks will eventually run out. And
one thing I expect Magnus to do is actually position his king on the same line as the Black king. And this just means that he can intercept any form of checks with potentially a queen, and there will be a pin against the queen and the king.
Yeah, that's very instructive. I expect maybe Magnus will step forward with his own queen first, and then he'll put his king along the 7th rank. Yeah, when you line up kings against each other, there's always tricks with checks and then kind of checks in reply. And
OK, he moves his king to the 7th row, and OK.
And yeah, sometimes we can't trust the analysis bar, but here it says 10.
Wow,
that's pretty trustworthy, I think.
Yes.
So yeah, that's simply because one queen is worth 9 points, 10 points. So White's about to make a second queen. That's why the advantage is 10. Simply. Do
you think Hikaru will keep going until that second queen is on the board?
Yes. He should keep fighting because queen endings, there's always a small chance that you might, your opponent might accidentally repeat the position trying to run away from the checks, for example, or your opponent might put their queen far away and then you can continuously check forever. But here, White's queen is perfectly placed to guard her king.
So Magnus needs to be accurate here.
Yeah, still.
It's not easy.
It's not easy. Still a little bit of work to be done, but everything so far has been mightily impressive. And he's not rushing. That's the key thing.
Yeah, but Hikaru needs to rush. 18 seconds left on the clock. What will he do? OK, moving his queen.
He gives one more check. The king does step back. And notice how Black can't... Well, Black didn't have time to go and pin White's pawn anymore because Black's own pawn was under fire. And the race has started, but White is ahead in this race. Also, White's queen protects the promotion square of Black's pawn. So even if Black were to get his pawn one square further down, White's queen would easily stop it.
Yeah, well, the pawn has advanced one more square, and I guess the only thing that Hikaru can do is... I was going to say not much, actually, now I think about it. Give up.
Yeah, but we might see 4 queens on the board. That would be cool. OK, I thought Hikaru might push his own pawns down and make another queen, but... yeah, White would have queened first, and then when Black promoted, White would have had the first move. He would have been able to give checks.
Magnus looks a bit shocked, actually. He did not see that move by Hikaru.
Oh, wow.
He's really cross with himself.
Actually, Magnus has to be really careful here suddenly. Hikaru has found a trick. I think there's only one move which wins cleanly. Probably a few moves win, but the cleanest move, there we see it.
Oh, wow.
There's a big difference between White's 3 choices here. You have to protect your queen. It's in a pin. You don't want to play queen takes queen because then we'll go into another queen position. Magnus finds the best move. And now Black's pawn cannot advance. That was a key move by Magnus Carlsen. Black's pawn cannot advance. It's protecting the Black queen. So now he's frozen black. And
So Hikaru's best shot is probably just to go queen takes queen, and after the queen is captured, push his own pawn.
Yeah.
Well, you know, this isn't necessarily the most optimum stragy.
Yeah, we see it just below the player's camera. Is queen takes queen's the only move, otherwise it's plus 100.
Oh!
So that's a pretty big margin.
But he is thinking about it. 17 seconds to go, and he doesn't do it.
He doesn't do it.
Then we go to 100.
We're heading to 100. When the computer says plus 100, it's essentially because it sees an immediate win. There's just a clean win, maybe even a forced checkmate. OK, a computer's horizons are far further than a human, so we should kind of take it tongue-in-cheek. But here, White's winning moves are all very logical.
Yeah, I mean, what's to stop the king from just advancing? OK, Magnus gives a check.
Wow, his visualization of the board. I would be looking at pushing pawns, focusing on that top left-hand corner. Magnus, he uses every possible square, brings his queen down the bottom, then he'll swing it across, then he'll do everything with it. Impressive stuff by the world champion.
Yeah, he's very flexible, very universal. We kind of mentioned it a few times, how adaptable he is to different situations. I mean, I certainly agree with you, David. I was expecting Magnus simply just to push the king one square forward and
break the pin.
And threaten to promote your own pawn.
Yeah, White's pawn cannot promote right now because it is pinned by the black queen against the white king. So why not step that king forward? Why not just prepare to make that second queen? But OK, maybe it was more effective on the last move. Right now, you feel that the white king and white queen aren't properly coordinated. So it's a bit strange of Magnus to play that move I actually praised, bring the queen the whole way down without having an idea in mind. But he loves his centralization. He loves putting his queen in the center of the board, stopping black's pawn from advancing as well. It would just be taken. So Magnus playing for domination rather than playing for checkmate.
Hikaru shaking his head. Is
3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second. 1 second he had left. Sorry, Kaya.
Yeah.
I interrupted there.
No, absolutely. Oh, and there he resigns. It's over. Hikaru Nakamura loses the third game in the first match in the final. Magnus Carlsen winning and saying something. And we definitely see a smile on the world champion's face, getting the first win in the final. And, oh,